Hello, and welcome to my video series about the entry that I submitted to NostalgiaVille. NostalgiaVille was a special mapping challenge run on runthinkshootlive.com between the 27th of April and the 24th of June 2018. The aim of the challenge was to create a level, or levels, for Half-Life 2 Episode 2, but have it set in the early chapters of Half-Life 2. My entry, Cosmonaut, took roughly 5 weeks of working hard on the maps at any free time that I had, and it took about 2 full weeks to make sure there were no visual bugs or things that may hinder gameplay. It has been playtested by 4 individuals who either know a lot about Half-Life 2 levels and mods, or who love to play first-person shooter video games. The entry contains 3 levels, which was the maximum amount of maps that could be entered by an individual. I will be playing through each one and talking about every aspect of the maps. The gameplay, the visuals, storyline and premise, and how I incorporated the theme. These videos will be really in-depth and will give you an idea on what it's like to work on a project like this. If you're planning on entering a challenge in the future, or you're new to Half-Life 2 mapping and level design, a lot of what I will say might aid you in doing so. Okay, so here we are in the very first map that I made for Cosmonaut, and I'm going to first off explain why it's called Cosmonaut and why the setup is the way it is. So I always planned on having the player coming in from the shore. That was either going to be on a boat, or they were just going to, swam across the sea or something. I couldn't quite work out until one day, it was like 4 days into the project, I realised that, because I wanted the player to have the suit, what if the suit, was like a space suit, like the HEV suit could double up as a space suit, and it's a crazy idea that I don't build on, but that was kind of the first thought for, well, that, he's walking about the city in his HEV suit, that could have helped him in space, so he could have crashed somewhere in the ocean. So that's why I had the bit at the start with it sounds like the rocket, crashing, and you can clearly see. Now the thing is, this is like the rocket in which you would take off in. It's not so much the rocket that you would land in, because there wasn't any decent landing pod things. I guess like this could have acted as one, but I wanted to make it clear that the player had just crashed, and if I was to write a full story to this, it'd probably be that this cosmonaut had been in space before the Combine invasion, and then for some reason now they've crashed. Again, I only made that the scenario, the premise as I'll call it, because I wanted the player to take on the role of someone feeling new to this whole Combine thing. Same as Gordon Freeman was in Half-Life 2, he didn't know anything about the Combine, he just got dropped in there by G-Man out of, being locked away for 20 years or something like that. So I also wanted the experience from a new, to be new to someone, the player role that the player takes on. Not many people, I think, will take on that role, but it's just something there. If they want to role play, if that's your game, then you can. You're now a cosmonaut. That's all I know, and it was just written for that. So I added in Metro Cop just to show that something's not quite right. Initially, I was supposed to have a scene where citizens were getting beaten up on that very dock, but I saved that for later on in this map. I'll show you when I get there. So similar to Misnomer, which was the last map I made for a challenge. Obviously that was I made Misnomer in a team with the Cat of War. I started that on kind of a beach, albeit it was a different beach. This one uses the coast theme, which was actually mentioned in the blog post, saying you can use any theme right up until the coast. So I thought, the first thing I thought is, well, I want to do that because I always wanted to make a Half-Life 2 coast section. Now this isn't that. This is just a beach, just one. That's it. But I like the aesthetic, and if I was to make another Half-Life 2 episode 2 or just Half-Life 2 mod, I'd very much like to do a coast section. Now these guys aren't supposed to be here, but I noticed when playing it that this happened, and I guess it kind of creates a bit of atmosphere, like again something's going on, but that's me justifying the reason why they're down here. So as the player, you can run about, you can explore, see if there's any secrets. I'm just going to spoil it now, there's not any secrets. What I would really want to do is have more buildings to explore. So the very first thing I wanted to do was make one of these boats, like actually make it out of brushwork and have it so you could go inside and have a look. But I got a bit too lazy, because that was one of these things I said, oh, I'll go back and do it later. I never did, so we get these low quality boats, but that's alright. I added in the Citadel. That wasn't there for the first part of the project, but I realised I would probably get a lot of criticism for not adding it in. People would be like, well, how can you have, something set in the city and not have the Citadel? So, incidentally, it doesn't make any noise, it's just there. I could have done a lot better having like noises, the Citadel noises coming from it. I think that's one place where I failed in terms of the nostalgia, but it's not, to me, it's not the most important thing. And actually, I played it quite risky with the whole. I cut on a lot of what could have been there nostalgically for gameplay, but that's just the way it is now. I think that was everything I wanted to talk about here. Probably not. I had a rehearsal before this, just so I knew what I was saying, but I've forgotten. Also, there's you can pick up goodies in this map, like batteries and stuff, because a lot of the time, one or two playtesters tried to go out into the ocean or whatever it is, and obviously there's the watery death trigger that is like leeches, I think it's supposed to be, where, so yeah, and then they complain because there was no health or anything. So there is health around these maps, just in case you were wondering. Okay, so similar to Misnomer, which I will reference, that, as I said, it was the map I did prior for Half-Life 2 Episode 2. There's this kind of fenced off area which requires you to go around. Now, when you're approaching this area, you can see there's an area up there which is kind of blocked by the crate, but you can see that there's a door and there's something here. So the player naturally wants to go and explore it because it's different. It's not just sandy beach, it's actually a platform of some kind. So this puzzle, because it is a puzzle, well, it's a very passive puzzle. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but instead of having an elevator where I as the player walk on the elevator, push the button and the elevator goes up, I want the player to have to stop, think about it, act on something, and then they can push the button. So here they look up, they've got to look down, so we're now working in two different directions. Down there you can see, it's maybe not clear, but there is an elevator platform. Naturally the player will go down here. This bit, I think I had a lot of different ideas for this and a lot of different concepts that I wanted. Initially the player couldn't get in there, they had to kind of pick it up and move it. This bit was, a different shape, and they couldn't get in, but then a lot of playtesters were missing the button. When I say a lot of playtesters, I mean 2, because obviously there was only 4, but some of them played it multiple times and things changed between times. So in this scenario, the player can actually walk into this area, which I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's supposed to be, but it's one of these things where it's necessary to complete this puzzle. I want the player to pick up the plug and put it in the socket. That's the kind of action that I wanted the player to achieve. Instead of pushing the button to go up in the elevator, they've got to pick up this plug. I don't know why it's disconnected. I don't know why there's a hole here. I was actually wanting to put debris and stuff to actually show it being like hacked, but with a hammer or something. You know, or, you know, a sledgehammer. Someone had been digging away to, you know, compromise it. I don't know. Rightly so, someone pointed out that there was no way in or out of here except this hole. So I added in this door. And initially, if you clicked use, it would make a lock sound to show it's a door. But that was confusing for the reason that people would think that putting the plug in there meant that they were going for it. I think it still might confuse people. I'm actually recording this before the majority of people have played it, so I'm not being influenced by what's happening, but I will make a video when I do get feedback from everyone saying what I could have done better. It'll be shorter than this, but this is kind of me speculating on what might happen. So yeah, it might still be confusing, but you can't use it or anything. So when you plugged it in, you heard a sound from over here, ding! And that would hopefully draw the player's attention, and as they're coming out, they can see the button. Instead of just putting it in there, climbing back up, they can now see the button. So now the elevator's moving up. Now, what happened is, playtesters would then jump off here for some reason. I don't know if, they were just, trying it, testing it, I'm not sure, but they always jumped off, and the first couple of times, this thing was broken, but I eventually got it fixed, so now it does actually come back down. And it stops there, which I don't know how legitimate that is, but it's a necessity. It's one of these things that you cannot change because the gameplay is like that. So moving up here, I'll quickly point out a flaw. The fact that, this thing's attached to this wall, which is very clearly not attached to anywhere in this... this elevator's just a shaky bit of level design anyway. Which I'm not so concerned about the shape of this, but this is just ridiculous. And I think if people notice that, I'm going to get, a lot of funny comments, criticising it, but that's just a little thing. So, incidentally, players like to, pillar up. I added this here just for the players who like to add barrels and crates and like to jump up. Incidentally, you can't get any higher than this. I think there's a player clip, which... I know people who will say, oh, there shouldn't be player clips anywhere. If you're... the player should be free to jump about, but... Yeah, there's one up there. But, it's appropriate to have one up here, just because if I was to see over that wall, you'd basically see nothing, And, the player doesn't need to be there. So... I added a battery, I don't know if you saw here, so the player would eventually, in case they hadn't seen the door, the player would be able to see it, because it is hidden from here, but if you're kind of up here, you're kind of going to find it, and if you don't, well, there's not much else, there's not many other places to go. I guess you could try and go over there, but that's very clearly inaccessible, but I'll come back to talk more about that later. Oh, and I forgot to make that door so that you could toggle it. I think it'll close, yeah. So this room is what I would describe as a connecting area. But my mantra after Misnomer was that there's no such thing as a connecting area. And that's going to be my mantra for a while, is that if you're going to have a connecting area that's connecting a big area to another big area, you've got to add some kind of gameplay. So obviously I made it so that it was a dip in the floor just for interest, just so it's not a flat, ground. You're actually going down, and then you're going back up. Just something little like that breaks up the room a bit visually, and then you're back up. Now we've seen this pipe and valve puzzle, if you want to call it a puzzle or obstruction, many times. I think it was in like Precursor and mods like that. Just to slow the player down, instead of them just running through the door. And I've said this so many times on my channel, it's like, this is probably like the 1000th time, and now it's in one of my own maps. you get burned, you know, you very quickly work that out, and it doesn't take much off. It's not like it's taking off a lot. Incidentally, I think some people thought you could crouch under there, and it doesn't actually, you know, affect. So that's somewhere where I need to improve, because people would probably get confused. It's like, well, I'm bouncing off nothing. Yeah, obviously you know, Valve have done well and very kindly made this valve bright red, so it's clear that it's what's controlling it. Incidentally, for consistency, you can turn this back on. In fact, I'll just try it, but there was like a point in which you could get stuck in it. Oh no, it seems to push me out. I think if like I went in further, you would actually be able to get trapped in the trigger, because there's not a trigger, a player clip. So there's like a player clip, a trigger, because I could throw this thing in, which a lot of people try to, you know, I guess that's just something they do, and it was always that specific prop. Okay, moving on to the next room. This room is one of the biggest, in fact, it is the biggest disappointment in this map, in the first map. This room, I had so many good plans for this room, and what I had visualised in my head, because with each area I always have something visualised in my head on how I want it to look. It's like concept art, but it's only in my head. So I can very easily build, and it looks the same as it looked in my head. It's just, I imagine the sun streaming through the windows, it was much brighter, there was a puzzle which I'll talk about, and it was all very nice, but it's turned out visually to be like this dark, depressing room. You know, someone said to make that brighter, and it's still dark. There's things that just look dark over here. It's just not a very nice place to be. I mean, I guess I quite like the fact that these lights are brighter, and that was an attempt to make it a bit more cheery, but it's still not what I wanted it to be. The puzzle I had here, I'll quickly explain it and try and be brief, but it was kind of like, imagine these two, but they were joined as one, and they created they were being held up by, you know, these barrels. I don't know where they are. Yeah, like a barrel like that, and, you know, a barrel like that, one on top of the other, like that, and it was holding it up because this walkway over here was falling. It was not supported by anything. Incidentally, these aren't supported by anything. These things don't support them. They're just part of the shelf. But, you know, the aim of the puzzle was to take away the barrels, and the thing would fall and give you a ramp to run up. So I did this initially, but I found when I was taking away the barrels, it would fall on top of the player, take some health off. It'd be really awkward. So then I added this railing in, and then I took away the barrels, and the thing fell on the railing. Like, the thing, as you see, it's kind of wide enough that it falls on the railing. So I did one barrel in, and playtesters were like, just take away the barrel. And then it's like, well, you can now, because it was only the one barrel, you could just jump on it. So my analogy for that would be, it's like kind of having a theme park where everyone can go on all these fun rides. It's kind of like taking out the rides and just having like these food outlets, like these overpriced food outlets that you can get like decent quality of food elsewhere without having to go to the theme park. It's like, well, what's the point in having that specific puzzle anymore? So not that long ago, like 2 weeks or something, I took it out, and now it's just a standard jumping, you know, jump. And then once you're up here, this is when the events trigger. So people start walking. The city's supposed to come alive. I didn't do very much of this alive city. Obviously, these guys have been flying about since the beginning. She's walking, just doing what you would do in City 17, and you can hear kind of an ambient track, which is the same ambient track that played when you came out of the train station. Instantly, all of my playtesters who recorded a video came up here, and then they jumped back down again, triggering the events but not seeing any of them. So I added this railing. I don't know if it's just because they were in like playtester mode, which, you know, that's when you pile up a lot more barrels than you do when normally playing it. Anyway, that was just a little side thing that, you know, I was very curious about. So instantly, you can go over, and these people
new in town, aren't you?
Talk.
Word to the wise, keep it to yourself.
Now the thing is, because she's being scripted at the moment, for some reason she can't look at me. I don't believe that's how it was done in Half-Life 2. I think it might have used the node graph, or just the nodes, you know, the hints and all that. So this is a scripted sequence, so she doesn't really look at you, she just looks ahead, she's moving, but it's not too much. And I think, you know, maybe people won't like that as much, but I'm still developing as a level designer. Incidentally, these guys, you know, do that, which I didn't actually realise happened in Half-Life 2. Now I'm going to show you one of the cringiest things ever. Look at that, the road just ends with no explanation whatsoever. I mean, that whole area just looks bad. And again, this was one of the areas I thought I'd go back up and do, and then it got to like 4 days ago and I realised there's no point. You know, people might look through there, but instead if you get too close to this guy, he's chasing you, which is something quite fun, at least probably for him. Just to kind of deter you, and obviously see that these civilians are getting, you know, oppressed by the Combine. So, talking about aesthetic and visuals, you have the industrial theme on one side, and you've got the city theme on the other. And I found I could get away with it. Obviously, I added in this dirt, I added, you know, a lot more trees. There aren't many trees. There is like a city tree on this side, but you've got a different style, so it's definitely a big contrast, but I feel I can get away with it the way I've definitely divided them up. So there's like a wall there separating them. It's not like they're all together, and it was necessary for having the beach basically, and looking at the beach. Moving on swiftly, because this is the smallest map and it's taking me ages to get through. This is the scene that I wanted over at, you know, the dock over there, but I moved it here just to show it's part of the city. Incidentally, there's a player clip there, so you can't get stuck behind these guys, because if, you know, you get stuck, they would constantly hit you, and that wouldn't be fun for anyone. There's probably still a few glitches you can do. This area over here is a bit of a happy accident, because I built this road and then I realised that this dock, which I made just as kind of a place that the player could look at, I guess it's not a dock, whatever it is, the player could look at it but not access. I just realised it was right here, so I joined them up.
Stay back, you'll attract unwanted attention. I can't be seen talking to you, not out here.
So it's kind of, you know, she's been drinking her alcohol on the dock, as happens, and again, I just wanted a place where you could look out and see the place you've just been, because I was kind of proud of, you know, this beach. I mean, it's not, you know, it doesn't look that great, to be honest, but, you know, I just like the fact that, you know, you're out here, you're looking about, and you know, I kind of wanted a G-Man sighting here, but that was not to be this time. Maybe if I was, you know, going back, or, you know, adding to this map, I'd maybe add him going into the water and having a look at what's going on, but, you know, if I was going back to it. So, pushing down the street, there's now a few things going on. So there's this door here, which is very misleading, and I realise, you know, quite recently how bad it was that that's right there, but you can see there's activity happening. But if you watch this,
Someone had the courage to do that.
that was just a little funny, I don't know what you'd call it, a funny thing where
If the dogs
you
are out here, we'll both be in trouble.
you know, because I wanted Breen
Whoops.
on the screen talking like he was in the apartments of Half-Life 2, but at the start I couldn't get it to work, so the whole concept of that was that the TV wasn't getting thrown out by the player, it was getting thrown out by one of the NPCs, and, you know, I hope that someone finds that comical, I hope. Incidentally, she's not being scripted, so she actually looks at the player, which is a bit more realistic, and I've had to disable the lines that say, you know, hey Gordon, or it's Freeman, or something like that. I'm now going to run you through what I want the player to do, the order of events that I want the player, not necessarily what the playtesters did or what other people will do, but what I want as the level designer. I'm hoping the player would do through certain, through what I've done. So walking down the street towards this area, the players to look over here and see these Metro cops having a conversation about this fence that's being electrified. Obviously they were, having a chat about it as if they couldn't get past it. That's kind of the aim I was trying to get from them. Looking into this fence, you can see the crowbar. You can also see this lambda symbol. And this was the objective of this was to try and get the player to understand that behind this fence and that door was a rebel safe house, basically. A place to go for citizens to hide, basically, and plan some kind of uprising. I don't know. I guess it's only like a week after the 7-hour war and the Combine are pretty new in town, but... So, they placed this fence here, or the fence was maybe already here, but the rebels, as I'll call them, were the people who electrified it to stop the Combine from getting over. That's the what I was getting. So the player's supposed to turn around, maybe go in there. Incidentally, there's nothing good in there, but... And then notice this door, which was blocked. The vision was blocked by these two boxes. Incidentally, there's still a light, so it actually looks, not as subtle as I was hoping. Also, the windows aren't aligned properly. Anyway, enough about that. So, yeah, the player is supposed to go in here. So this area is, again, a joining area. I couldn't do very much with it, so I just added in a vending machine in which you can get a few drinks. Just something for the player to partake in. It's not a puzzle. It's just some mind-numbing entertainment, like get 4 drinks out of a vending machine. This next corridor is an interesting one, because I, as the level designer, want to get the player to take a certain path. So as you're entering this door, as the player is entering this door, there's this wardrobe, or cupboard, or whatever you want to call it. And the player doesn't have anything to break it, so naturally they're going to try and move around it. So, seeing as it's at an angle, it's pushing the player towards this side of the hall, this left side, and I've made it kind of an indent, if you want to call it that. So now we're on this side of the hall. There's a door right here. There's also a door over there with not very much going on. I mean, I guess there's like a poster or something that might interest some people, but the point is the thing has now pushed us that we're practically at this door. So the majority of players are going to take this route round instead of go straight forward, and that was what I was hoping to achieve with that. So they're coming over here, they're now in here basically, and they're, psychologically they think, well, let's go into here. I don't know why that's there. That was a stupid place to put that. I've just realised I actually don't ever remember placing that. In fact, this whole room, I don't think I touched it since the first pass I did of textures and props. I think I threw them all in at the same time and didn't change it. Anyway, so now we come into this this lower apartment basically, which I'm not a big fan of it, but this guy speaks.
Place to stay. You better keep going.
He looks rather depressed. I don't know about that animation. Incidentally, there's something blocking him. I'm not sure how to get rid of that. I tried. I'm sure people will point that out to me and say like, oh, this is happening. Yes, I am aware of that. Also, I did like the kitchens and bathrooms in Half-Life 2, so I added a few of them. There's a kitchen here. There's also one upstairs, which I'll show you. And if you move through to the next room, there's nothing much. Again, this is just for the nostalgia. This is just to, harken back to when you're in that apartment in Half-Life 2 and all these people are talking to you.
Looks to me like things are getting worse, not better.
Another very depressed person. Just, like, sitting there looking. I wish I'd done, the scripting properly. That would have looked so much better. So now, we're now facing the stairs. We can see it's the you know, the way to go. Because if you go back here, and maybe someone will get confused and go back, but they'll soon realise that this is the right way. So up the stairs, this bit's boring and there's not a lot to say. Now we get to a point where there's two ways to go. A light area and a dark area. And the reason that this is dark is to show that it's a side area, it's not going to lead anywhere. The player can safely go in here without going too far. It was something that I initially thought it was going to be much longer in this apartment, but it's not that long. But it was just something that they can safely go in here, get their goodies, and then go back and come back out again. And I think there was a man in here at some point, maybe sitting on the toilet, but again, took that out. Can't think why. So, yeah. So now we come back to the objective. So hopefully the players remembered why they're here, or, you know, kept it in their mind why they're here. So I'm going to walk in this room.
Sorry.
And this citizen reacts. She's like shocked. And there is a lever now. Every single one, I think, of the playtesters who gave detailed feedback commented on how strange it was to have an industrial lever in an apartment block. So, and I tried everything to try and make it known that this lever was put here by the rebels. This is where they control their gate. This is where they can let people in or out, so they can look and see, like, someone needs in, so we'll take it down. They can walk in, sneak in there without the Combine seeing or whatever. So I really wanted to get that across. Incidentally, I don't think I've done a good job, so I think the majority of people are going to comment, you know, why is there an industrial lever? I even put that there, and that was there, I think, from the start. So, and yet people still didn't pick up that the citizens had put that there. It wasn't that, it was just part of the building. It had been installed. Again, this was originally part of it, but then I took that out because it was glitchy. Yeah, also there's another kitchen up here, which you can, you know, look around, bit of health. So I also added in a hint. Don't look at me and look away. Yeah, incidentally, I'll show you that NPC again. She's also in this map somewhere else, but you can see I made it so that the player can see the fence. So when they take it down, you can see it stopping. And she also says cut it out, as if you're doing something wrong, which you're not. Hopefully it doesn't give the player the wrong message and, you know, oh, we need to put it back. Oh yeah, I fixed it, because initially it went back and that was just too confusing. But yeah, so there we go. So at this point the player can now walk out of the apartment safely. Like, she's not going to turn it back on. It'd be quite funny if she did, but she doesn't. Another thing the player can do, and I tried to make it obvious with, like, this is where the TV was thrown from, is that you can climb out the windows. And a couple of people who playtested said, you know, in Half-Life 2, jumping out the window, you couldn't jump out the windows. But the thing is, in Half-Life 2, that was a convenience, because outside the windows in Half-Life 2, in the apartment block, outside the windows, there was no map. You couldn't go there. You weren't supposed to go there. So it was more convenient. Conveniently, you couldn't get out the windows. In here, however, you can get out. This is the map out here, so it's more of a feature here. And I don't know if many people will know to do that, or if they'll just run out the long apartment again. I don't know. It's something that I maybe could have done better at. But, you know, that's just, you know, the way it is. I'm just trying to think if I've forgotten anything. I think everything else here is pretty self-explanatory. You can still see the Citadel. I showed you that guy crossing the bridge, which I was quite happy at. I don't know, it just gave it a bit more character. Again, there's not very much to see if I was to climb up over there. In this apartment, that's exactly the same person who was just in the, you know, that apartment. I'm hoping no one notices, but I think they will. And this guy, he also says stuff.
Someday, this will all be a bad memory.
So now we're at an interesting point, because we're now at the part where we've passed the gate, we've achieved our objective, and we've got the crowbar. Now, most people picked up the crowbar, and most people are going to move through here. They're going to break the boards, which is teaching the player how the crowbar works. If, for instance, they stumble upon this map first, say it was like the first map in the pack and they'd never played Half-Life 2 or anything. I don't know, that's a very unlikely scenario, but I just like to, teach the mechanics, so they're going to push through there. But my initial thought and the idea I had was that the player, if they wanted to, could turn around. They could turn around and they could walk out the gate. I want to hit this guy first. He's glitched. Oh, he's gone. They could walk out the gate and go and massacre all these guys, but then there'd be like the Overwatch voice, and these guys would start piling out of these apartments if you weren't around this area. And it'd be what I called heist mode for some reason. And I tried to implement that, but it just seemed too much of a hassle to try and script it all, especially for the few players that would actually want it. So all I did was lock the gate, which isn't very good level design at all. And it's the sort of thing I don't advocate for, but I did it, so I'm a hypocrite in that scenario. But it was just so that the player didn't go out and start hitting them, because if I did go out and hit that guy, nothing would happen, and people would, probably comment more. So I've locked the gate. You can't get out. You can't, pillar up. A few people tried. I think there's like a trigger push there, pushing out. But that was just an idea that was cut from the game. The mod, the map, the entry, I guess. This is my favourite apartment bit, because it's so short, and there's probably more nostalgia in this apartment bit than the main one over there. Just, I made this area like the front door to the first apartment you go in, with a cupboard in here and all that. It's very similar. Now, we're now in an area which I consider to be, where is he? Yeah, to be controlled by the rebels and the citizens. Now this guy is flying about, which, if I was to make this again, I probably wouldn't have him, because I want the player to feel like they are safe to an extent. I want the player to feel like, they're in a zone where there's no metro cops here. They're not going to get, pulled up about anything. That's why I wouldn't have this guy in here. And there is a puzzle here to solve too. And this puzzle is to reiterate using the crowbar. So I've put the lambda symbol on the wall to show that the uprising has control of this area. This is a safe point, and it kind of looks like somewhere out of like that area, Half-Life 2 episode 1, when you get to that safe house, which I kind of liked, because I played them all of the Half-Life 2 games recently, and I kind of quite liked it, so I based it off that area. You can jump down here and look about. Incidentally, there's not very much to find, and I put that light here because allegedly people weren't finding this ladder. I don't think it helps, but I was hoping to draw the player's attention, so it's there just in case. And this puzzle's self-explanatory. You can see the rope is attached to the bridge, which is attached to this thing, which is down here. Now, it was difficult to try and get the player to realise what they're doing, because the player might hit this. That's not going to do anything. So I added these things, because players are, if the players only got the crowbar, they're going to start hitting things randomly. So I put these there in hope, because that's why it's broken off, to show that these things are not stationary. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't think I did a good job, because this thing was done on day number 1. I got started on it, and then this thing was done quite quickly. But if the player manages to work that out, they'll manage to work out to do that. And I added that sound just to show the player, or make the player aware that the bridge had fallen. And now they can cross. Incidentally, I think you could pillar up here. Oh. It doesn't seem to want to work this time. It worked well in rehearsals. Anyway, you seem to jump on top of there, jump on here, and then jump across there. You could do that, but doing that takes just as long as it does to break all of these, so the player's still having to do something. It's not the puzzle I want them to do, but they're still being resourceful. So I don't think pillaring across or using these things to even go down here before the bridge is dropped and pillar up, that probably takes him just as long. So doing that was kind of something that I wanted. I didn't mind players doing, basically. So that is it for the very first episode of my Cosmonaut series, in which I've been talking through all of the gameplay design decisions. Probably too much, but if you're interested in level design and you want to get into it, I'm sure you're going to love it. If you're just happy to see gameplay, I'm surprised you've watched this far. So I'm going to bring out the next episode, probably not that far in the future, and we'll continue on with map number 2.